Well, thank you very much. Before starting the panel discussion from the Renewable Energy Institute, we would like to share with you what we have been doing in terms of the research activities. It is still an ongoing research. What kind of elements have we been studying? So to that extent, we would like to share with you. I hope you will understand what I mean by this. May last year, from Nemolik, Mr. Bart Myers, who also spoke, by inviting him, we shared with you the interim report. It says ASG, Asia Support Grid Support Group. As the chair, the Yokohama University Professor Oyama was invited, and various experts a member from TEPCO served as an observer. We have been accumulating the work in this area. This is something we already shared with you. First, in Europe, there are some advanced examples. By collating them for the international transmission, we qualitatively covered them as a potential in Asia. What are the possible things we could do? And also here domestically, what are the issues we have in Japan? Again, we looked at them. It can be downloaded from our website. I would like to encourage you to take a look at it. On the extension of this study or these studies about cost and benefits in doing these international grids, what are the cost benefits? As business models, what can be thought of? In relation to these business models, what are the legal regulatory changes? What are the possible suggestions? So again, in these areas, we have been engaged in various research activities. In the last interim report, Japan and Russia, the 43 is the minimum distance. Korea and Japan, less than 200 kilometers. So what are the possible routes? With what kind of cost can we do that? Again, that's another thing we are trying to look at. Demand and supply difference, and there are differences, and also power mix differences. So with the transactions, perhaps there can be some kind of arbitrage. What kind of business models can be used? What are the benefits? What are the profits that can be derived from them? In the Asian International grid, there's a project, Japan-Russia, Japan-Korea routes. Cost estimates should be there, and then the feasibility, and also what about the investment recoup capability? What are the possible routes? We have to first look at those routes. Again, the transmission, the distance, and subscale, the geology can also have an impact on the project cost. Based on published data, this is a kind of a desk topic, the work to look at the reasonable routes. Also, Europe has an advanced example. Looking at those European examples, try to come up with cost estimates. In Europe and also in North America, they have their issues, but again, we have some Japan-specific cost-related issues. Transmission cost here in Japan, relatively speaking, it's said to be higher than that in the Western countries. So what are the elements that need to be taken into consideration? Looking at advanced examples and the peripheral examples, what are the Japan-specific cost matters? We have been doing this analysis, but in relation to this, there have been very limited cases of building those transmission lines. Costs are not so transparent. Offshore wind power generation in the subsea cables and substation costs for construction, again, we are looking at them as reference information. Russia-Japan routes and 2 gigawatts interconnection. Korea-Japan routes, again, 2 gigawatts interconnections. Those are the assumptions. Selection of routes have more or less finalized, but when we actually make a presentation, make it public, we would like to share that with you today. I would like to refrain from giving you any more specific information. So how we've been working the phase of evaluation of the business, the cost, the technological information collection, what is Japan-specific cost matters, project cost estimates, interconnection utilization, and then the business viability and analysis in the cost-benefit survey of the advanced examples and collating on those issues. What is setting assumptions for analysis, model building, and then the evaluation. How have we been studying possible routes? What kind of information have we been using or referring to? First, we need to look at where the interconnections, the optimum routes have to be looked at in setting the routes, for instance. The protected areas concerning the fishery, right? We need to look at the marine cadastre, and also looking at the places, the NEDO, the map, where the cables are to be first landed in the shore. Such information.
This kind of data is publicly available, and we refer to this kind of data to consider the optimum landing point. Furthermore, we take a look at past cases. This is the submarine cable unit cost data released by National Grid, and converter unit cost. SOE has released data about that, and UK and the Belgium Nemolink project, they release a lot of information, so we learned a lot from that project as well. So we refer to this kind of data to conduct the business model categorization. We select the IRR model, and we conduct a rough estimation for both the Japan-Russia route as well as Japan-Korea route, and laws and regulations are also being discussed. Sorry, this is a busy slide. We refer to this information to consider a business model. We took a look at Europe last year, and we are taking a look at the United States this year. And there are 4 types of representative grid business models. First is congestion rent model. The second is transmission rights sales model. Selling transmission rights to the transmission operator. And the first model, congestion rent model, NESA, market coupling, is used. And the access charge revenue raised from the market coupling is used as revenue. And the EU and PGM are using these models. And number 3 is the regulated grid tariff model. The line is constructed by fully distributed cost method, and investment recovery is carried out from all customers in the region. Skagerrak and Russia, China, they are using this model. And the generators and the certain customers are connected. And as a project to use this model, investment is collected, and grid net capacity and adjustment is shifted from one market to another. That's another model whereby investment is recovered. So we are considering various models in our study, and in around the summer of this year, we should be able to submit a report. And there are various other projects already ongoing, so we would like those other projects to be introduced now.
それではまず最初に先ほどの ADB の
First, the ADB project was introduced, and within the ADB project, what kind of benefits are there in the in grid interconnection? Philip from EDF will talk about the current situation.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank the Ministry of Energy of Mongolia, Renewable Energy Institute, and ADB for invitation. And I'm very honored and happy to participate to this roundtable. I am Philippe Lienhart, the team leader of ADB project Strategy for Northern East Asia Power System Interconnection. Call it NAPSI, but it's Northeast Asia Interconnection. It's a technical assistance to Mongolia. The purpose of my presentation is to present the project of interconnection using abundant resources of renewable energy in Mongolia in less than 20 slides, in less than 25 minutes. So I will go straight to the point before discussion. The summary is to present in the first part generalities on the project and also a word on EDF. In second part, the first results of the project. We are now halfway of this project, it's 2 years project, as said Mika, and we have, I think, interesting results that I will present on market and also on potential of renewable energy in Mongolia. First point is just a slide on EDF. EDF is a huge company based in France and Europe with assets in USA and Asia, mainly China and Southeast of Asia. I would like to stress on the low carbon strategy of EDF due to important nuclear forces. And in France, we are also very lucky because we have a huge potential of hydropower that represents 15% of our generation. And we have also a subsidiary called EDF Énergie Nouvelle, dedicated to renewable energy. We have recently closed almost all our coal-fired plants in France. And the result is that we have only 17 grams of CO2 emissions per kilowatt hour. To compare with other countries that have at least 500 grams per kilowatt hour, including Germany. The reason why we are interested in Northeast Asia interconnection is that EDF had to adapt during the long history of the construction of European power system interconnection. In fact, EDF had to adapt and had also to contribute to this construction. Very interesting. In fact, we like to share our experience, but we are conscious that Northeast Asia is completely different. So we share our experience, but we don't want to copy our model at all. The history is different, the context is different. Yes, the three phases of, it's interesting to say, the three phases of the construction of our system interconnection. The first one was a common system operation, reduction of cost, and common reserves. The second was the electricity market since 2000 with the unbundling. Unbundling is the separation between the TSO, the transmission, and the generation. And the third phase is high development of renewable in Europe. And the target is not 20%, it's 35%. It's a mistake in my slide. And we will succeed in reaching this high level of renewable energy in Europe by 2020. The project is a contract consisting of support to Mongolia state for entering the Northeast Asia interconnection with a consensual project based on huge renewable energy potential. The project has three parts, three master plans over 20 years. The first one is related to renewable energy in Mongolia. We will show you the first results. The second is about the interconnection between Russia, Japan, Korea, China, and Mongolia, and also the upgrading of the Mongolian grid. And the third is about the market. And I will show you the first results of the market studies we have done. And we have presented this morning because this morning we had a steering committee, 3-hour steering committee here, not just near this building. And we have the pleasure to work with Novatera in Mongolia, the consultant, and also the Center of Research of State Grid called CEPRIM. And there is a problem here with my slide. There is also a cooperation, very interesting cooperation with Rossetti in this project. The project is divided in 6 modules. The first module is about inception, the assessment of existing situation. The second is about market studies. The third is about the assumptions for the studies. And the fourth is about the generation in Mongolia, conventional, but also renewable energy. So we have represented the module 2 and module 4 this morning, and we are halfway. And the next step will be the grid study, the power system interconnection study. We will present in Beijing next October this year. And we will conclude the project with power trade master plan with proposal of regulation evolutions in May 2019. The context is that NAPSI Northeast Asia countries represent 25% of global GDP, 22% of global population, but bad news, 40% of global CO2 emission. On the other side, Mongolia has very interesting assets, central key position, huge potential in wind and solar, and its main stakes is the attractivity for private investors. So now I am going to present the first results of our study. First of all, the assumptions of the studies. We made global assumption for the studies. We made technical cost estimation. Grid, we had an assessment of all grid safety rules of every countries. Economic parameters. For political and regulatory, we have included, for example, demography. We made also socio-environmental study with CO2 emission, but also with the interview of 7 Mongolian representatives. And it's gathered in a report we have presented in the last workshop. And in this report, there are 3 recommendations I would like to show you quickly. The first one is about the Northeast Asia interconnection grid code, because it's very important to have an harmonization of the rules over the involved countries, especially on the issue of connecting HVDC lines between all these countries. We have also a second recommendation about the creation of a common grid authority for operation feedback analysis, for maintenance planning, for accounting and settlement of the exchange of electricity, for grid planning, to have, and all these issues have to be managed in common, allowing cooperation, mutual assistance, and also fair competition. The third recommendation is about the attractivity for Mongolia, for private investor in Mongolia. We recommend to have a specific regulation framework with including stable revenues, how will we handle the priority of dispatch of renewable energy and the issue of curtailment, minimal curtailment, legal maturity, financing facilities, visibility on the renewable target, and the question of pre-permitting, the risk of pre-permitting of sites, and the grid connections issue. Now the results of our study on the potential of Mongolia in wind and solar. First of all, we have used, thanks to our R&D, a GIS, a Geographical Information System tool, with the latest data, which enable us to reconstitute historian over 30 past year at, for example, for wind, 100 meter high. We also envisage in this study the last technology for 2020, and we made a projection on future technology by 2026 and 2036. We have deleted the lands with regulatory and environmental constraints. It remains, I go quickly, it remains around 40% of the land of Mongolia. And we have classified the land with a ranking methodology in scores. The best scores are in the dark region. And these regions are perfectly situated in the direction of exportation we intend to have, I mean southeast. The results are better than the former studies we have already read, the studies which are already published, because we have used the latest data and the latest technology. Here is a map with the existing grid. The connection capacity is low today because it's a 110 kV grid, and by 2020 it will be a 220 kV. And we estimate the capacity of connection at 400 megawatts. But maybe you see the round close to the grid. In this region, we have the best potential, the best scores for wind and solar. I mean, 200 gigawatt for wind and 1,200 gigawatt for solar. And this is enough for all the scenario we can imagine for exportation. This is for the potential of renewable energy in Mongolia, wind and solar. And this is about the results of the market studies we have presented this morning. First of all, we have envisaged scenarios of by 2020, and scenarios of 5 gigawatt for exporting 5 gigawatt of renewable energy from Mongolia, 5 gigawatt in 2026, 10 gigawatt in 2036, and we have made an exercise in order to see in the future what will happen. And this exercise is about 100 gigawatt. The result on profitability is good. This slide is a little bit difficult to read. The blue point will give you the cost saving after interconnection and after interconnection with renewable energy. The red point is when you take off the investment. And you see that with interconnection, you have 4 billion of savings, a year, and without investment, it's 3 billion. So it's very, very profitable. And renewable energy gives you additional benefits. It's on the right, interconnection plus 10 gigawatt of renewable energy. And on the right, you have the scenario of the large interconnections. And you see that the blue points, the savings are around $18 billion a year. And if you take off the investment in interconnection, you have 9 billion of earnings every year. And it's even better when you take large interconnection with 100 gigawatt of renewable energy in Mongolia. So it's very clear. The interconnection is profitable. Even today, if it were today, it would be very profitable. And the results of this study shows that there are interesting reduction in CO2 emissions for 10 gigawatts, but it's more significant, of course, with 100 gigawatt for all NAPC region. So I want to conclude. I hope I am on time. Yes, I am on time. Thank you.
7 more minutes.
Okay. No, but you have shown me 5 minutes, so it's okay. Okay. So the main conclusion of this study are the following. First of all, the potential of wind and solar in Mongolia is confirmed. In the short term, it will be the connection to the grid will be limited to 400 megawatts, but all scenarios close with the potential close to the grid will be possible. We have envisaged in our study 5 gigawatt in 2026, 10 gigawatt in 2036, and even 100 gigawatt, and all these scenarios are feasible. The result of the market study, the interconnection is beneficial for exchange of energy, of electricity. And wind and solar renewable energy produced in Mongolia is the most competitive compared to the other countries, especially Japan and Korea. And NAPSI, Northeast Asia Interconnection, will reduce CO2 emissions. And we recommend for Mongolia a specific regulation framework to favor private renewable energy investment. We recommend to write a common grid code for rules harmonization, and we recommend also to create a common authority for supervision, feedback analysis, and decision making. Thank you for attention.
Can you just remain here? I will take one or two questions.
Right.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much. If you have a technical question, if you would like to ask a technical question, perhaps we can entertain one or two questions, some technical questions.
もしございません。
If not, we would like to move on to the next presentation. Next, from Korea, Korean Electric Power Corporation from KEPCO, Mr. Yoon Junghwan. Well, within KEPCO and SoftBank, there have been many projects that have been taking place, including the current status of Korea. He would be sharing some information with you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to appreciate the coordination and preparation of Mongolian government, Ministry of Energy, and ADB, and also REI. So my name is Junghwan Yoon, and I'm in charge of development of Asian supergrid, and especially China and Korea and Japan power grid interconnection project. So it is great honor to give a presentation in this forum. So today I'm going to talk about current power system in Korea and also the background and purpose for Asian supergrid concept. And also I'd like to point out why and for what KEPCO is willing to implement Northeast Asian supergrid. And then I will share current status and progress in Korea. So firstly, KEPCO grid characteristics. So Korean power grid is isolated due to the separation between North and South Korea. In Korea, about 40% of total loads are concentrated in the metropolitan area. On the other hand, the baseload power plants are located along the coast. In addition to that, several power plants within the metropolitan area are LNG system of which the cost is high. Therefore, we need long truck lines with large capacity. As you can see in the table, power demand in Korea has been rapidly growing. In 80s and 90s, the growth rate was about 10%. Then it slowed down, but it is still high compared to other countries. Okay, the new government has set the new vision on energy sector up this year. So two remarkable poles of this policy is that phasing out the nuclear power plants and coal-fired power plants. the government will not allow new project of nuclear power plants and service life expansion on the existing power plants. In addition, 10 units of aged coal-fired power plants will be shut down earlier than their expected service life. And also, the new government is aiming that 20% of power will be generated by renewable energy sources by 2030. It is called Renewable Energy Vision 3020. For this ambitious goal, more than 58 gigawatts of renewable energy facilities shall be equipped. It is kind of tough goals, and KEPCO will definitely do its best by any means. Let this problem rest and start another topic, renewable energy resources. So, as you know, recently the use of renewable energy is exploding. Even at this moment, somewhere on the earth, the sun is shining and the wind is blowing. But the renewable energy resources are geographically concentrated, similar to other natural resources. As you can see from the map, regions with abundant renewable energy display few energy demands. This is called the paradox of renewable energy resources. So traditionally, the cross-border power grid interconnection has been started to overcome power shortage in certain countries, or to enhance the power system stability, securing more power reserve. Nowadays, this paradigm of supergrid has been changing. European continent is ahead of this paradigm shift. Supergrids are being implemented to integrate diverse energy sources, especially renewable energy sources from different areas. And it can make effective use of electric power through power trading between nations. We may expect that the new paradigm of supergrid will lead the reduction of CO2 and also the fine dust against global climate change. So through the know-how gained in smart grid and energy storage system, KEPCO dreams to jointly develop and utilize renewable energy sources with other countries in Northeast Asia. To respond to environmental problems such as climate change and fine dust, the wind of Mongolia and China and Russian hydropower will flow over the Northeastern Asia through the supergrid. So I would like to briefly introduce the major progress of KEPCO. So last is the year 2016. KEPCO signed an MOU with State Grid Corporation of China and Japan's SoftBank and Russia Rosseti to promote the Northeast Asian supergrid. And we select China, Korea, Japan power grid interconnection as the first project and jointly conducted a preliminary feasibility study. And finally, last year, President Moon Jae-in proposed the promotion of the Northeast Asian supergrid to the leaders of Northeast Asia at the Eastern Economic Forum held in Vladivostok. And last year, President visits China and also discussed economic cooperation, including Northeast Asian power grid and super grid. And also KEPCO and State Grid Corporation of China and GATECO concluded joint project development MOA to develop China-Korea power grid interconnection project within the framework of the Mongolia, China, Korea, Japan power grid interconnection project. So as we will discuss about the establishment of joint working group and steering committee and do a further study on technical and economical feasibility again and power market and regular policy in both countries. And also between Korean MOTIE, Ministry of Trade and Industry and Energy, and China NEA has concluded intergovernmental cooperation MOU on energy policy exchange and high-level conference, etc. in the energy sector. And is power grid interconnection is included in this MOU as well. So probably you cannot read this document as well, but it is government policy on long-term based electricity supply and demand. So is the policy on Northeastern Asian supergrid has formulated in last year, and its government would like to implement NEA supergrid to jointly utilize clean energy sources in NEA region. So it is the cover of 8th basic plan for long-term supply and demand. And you can see the basic concept is mapped in the document. So I'd like to mention about potential risks in supergrid project. So according to the research by Dr. McKinstray, its policy and financial and planning and consenting risks are much severer than technical issues. If so, how those risks can be mitigated and minimized. So we can refer to the good example in the Europe. So I'd like to summarize the key success factors of European supergrid into two parts. And as everybody knows, they have got the administrative center, European Commission. So EC has made policies for cross-border power grid interconnection. The Trans-European Energy Network called 10E was formed in 2003. In 2009, when the third energy package was introduced, all the related regulatory frameworks were completed. Especially cross-regional, cross-continent transmission system operator was launched in 2008 called ENSO-E. So ENSO-E is in charge of cooperation and coordination of works among 42 TSOs in Europe. So in light of this, an intensive intergovernmental cooperation to form rules and regulations is required, and the related TSOs or parties should cooperate closely to implement Northeast Asian supergrid. So as I have mentioned, policy and political risks are significant in the development of cross-border projects. So if a kind of mutual agreement is concluded and announced officially, it will solve the uncertainty and make the potential shareholders feel more comfort. And the parties can design the future Northeast Asian supergrid project in detail based on this intergovernment agreement. This detailed project development framework agreed on as joint development agreement can mitigate planning and consenting risks as well as financial risk. If the Northeast Asian countries address these two poles of private-public collaboration as the intergovernmental agenda, the progress of supergrid project will be accelerated. In addition, the cooperation between governments is absolutely essential. First of all, each of the governments shall reach on the consensus of the business model. And because each country has a different regulatory framework, power market structure, and tax law, those shall be adjusted carefully from the perspective of win-win strategy to make Northeast Asian supergrid project feasible and bankable. So it was a great pleasure to see such meaningful forum open at a crucial juncture. I think that all the stories we share today it will be the basis towards one Asian. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Miwa from SoftBank to give us his views. He's currently the CEO of the SoftBank's energy-related overseas businesses, Japanese businesses are supervised by him. Mr. Miwa, the floor is yours. So it's in Japanese.
これとこれが送るでいい。これが送るでいいですね。そう戻るですね。はいはい。ソフトバンクの
As was introduced, my name is Miwa. I'm with SoftBank. Thank you so much for giving your precious time. About the Asia Supergrid, SoftBank, the renewable energy business, the Asia Supergrid, it's about international transmission projects. It's not an academic presentation. I hope that you just relax and listen to me. So has SoftBank been thinking about? What's SoftBank's perspective? I hope that this presentation will help you understand that. Very briefly, our history, SoftBank, communication company, telecom communication company. And why in this energy business or Asian supergrid business is now studied and promoted by SoftBank. I won't cover everything, but regarding the business domains, communication, cellular company, but then after the Great Eastern Japan earthquake and after the Fukushima nuclear accident, the importance of energy was once again acknowledged by SoftBank. Cellular phones, those cell towers, bases, they don't have the power and they can't transmit the waves length. So what we thought as the lifeline, we are the mobile company, but we couldn't operate without electricity. So we need to squarely tackle electricity issues. We should be proactive. In addition, if possible, it should be clean. It should be renewable energy. If possible, we should promote them. So that's the significance of the energy projects done by SoftBank. We've been doing many things. One of the members of the organizers, Renewable Energy Institute, it was established, and then the mayors of Japanese municipalities, together with mayors, we had set up a council to promote renewable energy, SB Energy. This is a project company. And so in Mongolia, the developing of wind power generation, and India, and more recently in Saudi Arabia, large-scale PV development is. These are some of the things we do. So we do many things. It's not what I want to say. There are two key messages I'd like to share with you today. First, energy and internet, energy and communication. They are very close to each other. In other words, I will come back to this issue later. As an energy company or as an electricity company, SoftBank is not looking at this as such a company. The fusion of energy and the electricity, we would like to see something more than just the fusion of the two. Second point, as for the renewable energy, it has started transforming and redefining all sorts of businesses going forward. Innovation in the international community, they should start with the cardinal points of the dissemination of renewable energy. That's the very basic understanding that we have. That's why we are engaged in these activities. 650 megawatts, the 42 sites, we operate them. In India, we started developing the businesses. It's been just 2 years. In Japan, we've been doing this for 6 years. In 2 years in India, the achievement is much higher than what we did in Japan. India, 950 megawatts. We already have that much in India. In Japan, spending 6 years, 650 megawatts is what we have. So in terms of the quantity, that's what we do. But I think we have developed certain prowess in Japan. 42 sites. Each site is small. In India, the first one, 350 megawatts. The first one was 1 megawatt. You can see that in Japan, with 1 megawatt, it's called mega solar. In terms of numbers, well, that's the difference, you might think. But 42 sites, 1 megawatt, just several of the megawatts. But we have dozens of sites, and we have collected all the data in Japan. I think this is going to turn out as kind of weapons we have. Developers in renewable, it's the same thing with the wind power generation or solar power generation. Renewable developers in Japan, on the global scale, they started developing these strong weapons in all sorts of environment, because the region by region, why it's such a small country, region by region, they are so different. Every day I get the data from 42 sites, and they're so different, so diverse. PV, the wind power generation, resources are different. In addition to that, there are different characteristics of different sites. We started collecting those data. While the scale is small, we have so many sites. And that's our strength. So as for Japan, it's not that it is not appropriate for renewable energy. You might think that just looking at the number, it may not really be appropriate. But utilizing these pieces of data, I think we can do something new. We started doing retail, fuel cell, FC. We started tackling them. It's not renewable energy, but using natural gas, getting hydrogen out of natural gas, and with the electric reaction, then creating electricity. Electrical chemical reaction. There's no combustion. The CO2 emission is overwhelmingly small, and it has a very high energy efficiency. Now, going to Mongolia. Today, representative from Mongolian government has introduced this to us. If it's wind power generation, Northeast Asia, Gobi Desert, it's the corridor of wind. Overwhelmingly have they're blessed with wind resources. They have so much land. Developing this area is logical. Newcom, together with the Mongolian partner, the local partner, we started developing these. In the Gobi Desert, 326,000 hectares. So it's about the Tokyo prefecture. It's much, much bigger than the Tokyo prefecture as a whole. The right of use of this this land has been afforded by the Mongolian government. If everything is developed here, it has a potential of exceeding 13 gigawatts. October last year, 50 megawatt TSII project was completed. It started production. It's in the Mongolian desert. Coal, copper, Tabanto, somewhere between the two. It's in the Gobi Desert. That's been completed. So far, so good. We are doing the study for 2 gigawatt. Some supplementary information. 2 gigawatt development. At the same time, we already have a cost target. Generation cost, 2 cents per kilowatt hour. 2 cents per kilowatt hour. 2 gigawatts. That's the study we do. As for our introduction, we have already had several cases with economic reasonableness. Renewable energy is overwhelmingly competitive in terms of cost. So just for your information, in this city, the 50 megawatts that's already operating, you cannot do 2 cents. But the generation cost is lower than 5 cents. This is the actual track record, so I'm very confident in saying this. 50 megawatts, it's lower than 5 cents. This is the generation cost. So with this 2 gigawatts the study, well, we have the 2 cents target. Another thing I would like to introduce to you, this is city, the 50 megawatts the wind farm, the first time in the Gobi Desert. The Japanese METI, the FS, they contributed the FS budget, so we did the feasibility study. And about 70% of the total development cost was from JICA and the EBRD. By their syndication, we were given the project financing, and with that, we were able to develop this. Going to India, 950 megawatts, I already talked about this project in India. Again, going forward, the solar introduction is likely to accelerate. Centering around Delhi, the pollution is terrible. And in India, again, they are blessed with a huge, vast land and blessed with the solar. So they are also positive about development. Already new coal-fired, rather than coal-fired thermal power plants, the PV, the development is cheaper, less expensive. Now, Asia Supergrid, ASG, 2011, after the earthquake, SoftBank looked at these possible energy projects. Our CEO and also the chairman of the Renewable Energy Institute, Mr. Son. Mr. Son wanted to do this Asia Supergrid. At the risk of repeating myself, in Northeast Asia, in a wide area, develop renewable energy. If we could connect to them, then inherent weakness of renewable energy, not stable, all these problems can be solved. Because solar, the wind power generation, yes, they are intermittent in their characteristics, but with the wide area interconnection, the problem can be solved. That was one aspect. The renewable energy, in terms of introducing them in a huge volume, wide area development scheme is necessary. Now look at Europe, look at the American continent. Countries and countries are connected by those tie lines, interconnections. Why we can't do that here in Asia? Now, lastly, SoftBank is a communication internet company, and then in IT, we try to do business with IT revolution. We want to make people happy. That's the mission we have. So from that perspective, innovation going forward, new businesses going forward, with renewable energy interconnected, those things will be born. So from us, we believe that we are at the center. This is the center of the businesses. A little bit of a history. The momentum, the higher, KEPCO, our colleague from KEPCO mentioned this. 2016, in China, GATECO, the organization was established, and at that spot, Global Energy Interconnection Development Cooperation Organization, KEPCO, of China. In the general plenary session, these four countries concluded MOU to study the Asian supergrid. The importance of these four countries, as you can see in the material. As a result, Russia and Roseti, 2016 August. Again, this economic story was sort of addressed. Mongolia, China, Korea, Japan, March 2017, State Grid Corporation of China, SGCC, KEPCO, SoftBank, pre-FS was concluded. Again, technology-wise, it's feasible. HVDC technology has been well established. It's been operated in various places. As for the economic, the reasonableness, it's totally feasible. But there are political, the regulation, the regulatory issues. Those issues remain. So how should we solve or address these issues? That's where we really should rack our brain. Unfortunately, after the pre-FS completion, we haven't enjoyed a major momentum or progress, because in the international interconnection projects, you need a blessing from governments. You need the active involvement by the state governments. Otherwise, it's a bit difficult. In Russia, President Putin, Korea, China, and Mongolia, the heads of the nations on the SG, initiative, they have been giving us the positive support. About Russia, Prime Minister Abe and President Putin in 2016 in Sochi, the agreement was reached in May, where there have been many discussions in economic cooperation. From the Russian side on energy, studying them positively, the program was proposed actively. In Japan, we don't have the foregone conclusion, but we would like to study. That's the stance. President Putin every year in Vladivostok, in the Eastern Economic Forum, every time about international interconnections. Very strong proposal was made, and the kind of strong determination and support has been expressed. President Moon Jae-in, the same holds true for him. During his while he stays in office, about doing this international connections, he showed strong determination. September last year in Vladivostok, in the Eastern Economic Forum, Japan, South Korea summit meeting was held. This was a proposal made by the Korean government that he wants to strongly promote the collaboration between the two countries. We haven't seen such a strong momentum from the Japanese side. Against that backdrop, now looking at China, the One Belt, One Road, OBOR, they have this grand concept. As SoftBank, as I said, as I have been saying before, in Mongolia, the wind power generation, we would like to do that. And we have been doing this study. We would like to enjoy progress in India as well. This is my key message, just one sheet of paper. There's an English version available. I think it will be uploaded. This one is in Japanese. Since I have your kind attention, you're sharing your precious time with us. In neighboring countries, they already show some advancement. You have already heard from KEPCO's presentation. Have you noticed? There are 4 countries after pre-FS with those 4 countries. That's already publicly available information. Okay, China, Korea, actually, between China and Korea at government level, and between SGCC and KEPCO on the international connections, MOA that has already been released. So, in Asia Supergrid, in this concept, yes, attentively he said that, but between China and Korea, they have already started studying the connecting the two countries officially. In Japan, yes, Japan has Japan-specific issues. And yes, I shouldn't be too quick to say anything, but is it really okay that we are left behind? As I have been repeatedly saying, innovation going forward, the new models going forward, definitely on electricity, on grid, and on renewable energy. These are the cardinal points that start with. At least at SoftBank, we believe that's our future, the new era. Is it okay that Japan is left behind? One more thing. What's true in KEPCO's material and also true in my presentation, international interconnections. We are just talking about 2 gigawatts. In Japan, we have 250 gigawatts installed capacity, 1.5 thousand in China, 100 gigawatts in Korea, then Russia, 200 gigawatts. Mongolia, domestic, the market, it's 1 gigawatt or so. And we are talking about 2 gigawatt project. There is a security issue, people say. Yes, that may be right, but then using the subsea cables, how do you look at the cybersecurity issues in the connection? Compared with that, we are talking about the 2 gigawatt. I don't really think this is a security issue, even in the pre-feasibility study within the state grid and also the KEPCO. We did analysis of the flow or the current. From Waseda University, Professor Yokoyama, he's also here. He kindly extended his help. Using a certain model, when the 2 gigawatt is transmitted, we analyze the possible flow. No problems with Korea, China, for the sending out or receiving the 2 gigawatts during the peak, during the off-peak, looking at the local demand. They also did the analysis. They said it to be okay. So technically, we already got that conclusion. So 2 gigawatt, it's a very symbolic project. It's a symbolic project so that we are not left behind compared with other neighboring countries. If we do this, we believe this is in our interest, and also it would lead to the inclusive interests of the Asian neighboring countries. Among OECD countries, perhaps this Electricity Business Utilities Act. On the international connections, there are 2 countries that do not mention these international connections, Korea and Japan. And looking at Korea, the president, under the President Moon's leadership, they are now have made a move already to be very proactive in pursuing international connections. So thinking about the significance of 2 gigawatts and the grid being connected, looking at the significance, and also the renewable energy goes up, and then the electricity becomes more stabilized, and all the new businesses going forward, it will be triggered by this electrification. Is it okay that we are left behind? As for tariff bill, it goes down. What kind of at what level do we think about interest rates? With 10 cents, if the electricity becomes available, so there is a market of 30 cents. Is that really the national benefit? So from whose perspective are we talking about this national interests? I can't jump into conclusion. There are 10 KEPCOs in Japan. And yes, they have to manage their companies. And electricity is a very important platform. And of course, you have to think about it. But cost of building grid and the electricity tariff goes down. What are the benefits? Whose perspective you want to actually think about them? I think that perspective is very important. The private company can do certain things, they cannot do certain things. But resolutely, humbly, in Japan, in Asia, we would like to develop renewable energy aggressively and Asia Supergrid on international connections to the extent possible. Again, we would like to pursue these. And last but not least, sometimes when I'm giving the opportunity like this is what I explain about. Going forward, it's a conceptual page. Era of IoT, people often talk about this, but it's actually a year of GOT, using the human anatomy, the respiratory and circulatory systems, this blood systems. Unless you have a clean blood circulating, even if you are talking about IT, even if you are talking about a nervous system, you cannot survive as a human being. Business model, it's the same for the business model. Renewable energy, using that as a base, international connections, once they are established, and the various wide area businesses are perhaps likely to be spawned. Lastly, when I talked about this, please be more specific. That's the question that I received. So with one last example, I would like to conclude. Just for example, more recently, Mr. Son, the head of SoftBank, he has all the taxi sharing companies in the United States, Uber, in China, DD, in India, Oracab, Southeast Asia, 8 countries, Grab taxi, and in Europe and in Brazil, there are many other companies, and taxi sharing companies. Why SoftBank is making investment in such companies? Yes, there are different perspectives, but at least from the viewpoint of energy, those companies are likely to only increase. Sharing is likely to increase. And sometime in the future, those taxis, they will be transformed to the EVs, switch to EVs. Then batteries are likely to be the half of the cost in that ecosystem. They're going to come to the very key positions. So batteries. Then now we're seeing the world of electricity. With clean energy, creating EV, yes, electricity, if it's generated from coal, it may not be good. So perhaps in integrated manner, you start addressing these issues. In the IT, there are new services, renewable energy, we have to tackle them together. Otherwise, the business cannot really be operated. So that's one example. It has been a rather impromptu presentation, and that I was a bit too bold in certain aspects, but the Asia Supergrid, the wide area, power exchange, the international transmission, first at the level of 2 gigawatts, where it has no impact on security. Should there be any disconnection, there should be no problem. In a symbolic matter, if we could start it with that scale, and with Asia neighboring countries, so that we shouldn't be left behind. If we could do that, I think that would benefit the security of our country, Japan. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miwa. Then I would like to invite Oi-san, Mr. Oi, to make a comment, and then let us go on to panel discussion after Mr. Oi's comment. Mr. Oi, would you like to take the floor? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I would appreciate some time. I'm from ADB. My name is Oi. Please allow me to spend a few minutes. In the 2 previous presentations, Philip from EDF made a presentation, and I'm a task manager of the study, which was covered by Mr. Philippe Lienhart just a few presentations ago. So I'm supposed to make a comment. I think Mr. Miwa has already covered all I was going to say. But when we launched this study, and by the way, from 4 years ago, we've begun discussions about this project. And as I look back, 4 years ago, it was a very small group gathering of researchers, and we talked about the potential of this concept, of this initiative. That's where we started. But then, in a very short while, without our knowing it, In China, public-private partnership has begun to launch the grid interconnection, and the same situation applies to South Korea as well. In the case of Mongolia, the government is now addressing renewable energy. They want to export renewable energy, and they want to use this as the source to gain a foreign currency. So there is a very strong message coming out from these players. But this has become very prevalent only in the last 2 years. Now, in the past workshops, we covered Mongolia. Well, we began with Mongolia. And what surprised us was that in a concurrent workshop, ambassadors from various countries gathered at the forum, and they all wanted to advocate this initiative. However, the ambassador from Japan was not present. I think that was very symbolic. Well, in any event, we had a similar, correction, in South Korea, we had a similar situation. So South Korea is now taking a nationwide approach to pursue regional grid interconnection. So they were very enthusiastic, and very high-level representatives from the government from South Korea were present at the workshop in South Korea. So my impression is that South Korea is now indeed incorporating the interconnection as part of their policy portfolio. Now, I arrived at this forum today and this morning about the technical study. We had a report session on the technical study. And one positive thing from that meeting was that we had observers from TEPCO, Tokyo Electric Power Company, as well as from METI, Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, and also from the Energy Institute as well. And some people actually spoke at that steering committee. So I think it really is a step forward. We have really taken one step forward. It's a very positive step. The fact that we have a forum is, of course, due to the fact that Renewable Energy Institute, concurrent with their study, wanted to launch their own study. So we actually were able to compete over our respective research activities. And I think both organizations really were involved in increasing the awareness of this particular initiative. And afterwards, I think we will be engaging in panel discussions. So going forward, if we are able to realize international grid connection, interconnection, we hope that how can multilateral financial institutions like ourselves offer support? That's something that we really need to give consideration to. And I hope that in a separate session, we'll be able to discuss the role to be played by international financing organizations. Thank you very much.
ではちょっと
May I ask the speakers to move to the front? Without a break, we should continue with the panel discussion, or we shall start a panel discussion. Speakers, please come to the table in the front. The moderator for session 1, Thomas Couverier, the President of Executive Board of REI, and we also have Irina, Innovation Technology Center, Dorga Girin. Irina is also being cooperative on these initiatives where natural energy is utilized, or where introduction of GEI is considered. So we would like to get their comments as well. Let us begin the panel discussion. If there's time left toward the end, we are thinking of opening the floor for questions. So if you have questions, please hold on to them. Now, we heard presentations from all of you. Thomas and Dorf, any comments on the presentations that you heard so far? If there are any comments, how can we pursue international interconnection here in Japan? If you could please kindly comment.
We are engaging in similar projects around the world. We have a number of clean energy corridor initiatives one for Eastern and Western Africa, one for Eastern and Southern Africa, one for West Africa, one for Central America, and we're also then now to some extent involved here in this study. I mean, looking at the numbers here, the potentials are enormous. If I compare this with the other regions, then this is an order of magnitude larger, and so it's an enormous potential. It's of great global relevance. If you can realize this project, it will bring down global greenhouse gas emissions in a very significant way, and the potential to reduce electricity cost is also very significant. So we just heard from Mr. Miwa that the cost of wind generation is 2 cents a kilowatt hour. If you combine that with 3-4 cents for the transmission, you get a very attractive price. So looks like a great business opportunity.
Indeed. I started this afternoon describing how the combination of an open, transparent, competitive electricity market brought down the cost of the electricity system in general, and therefore the electricity price to the consumers, and the potential to make that benefit for the consumers even larger by increasing the range of the electricity market by improving transmission capacity. I think the presentations that we've heard, maybe especially Miwa-san's at the end, also points clearly to how these two things come together. Even a small transmission line between Japan and neighboring countries would necessarily come together with a transparent market solution, deciding how that transmission line is to be used. And that would introduce a transparency, competition, and reduce the price just by removing inefficiencies and unnecessary profits in parts of the electricity system, probably on both sides of that transmission line. So the establishment even of a small line would probably have a significant benefit by improving the efficiency of the electricity market. Thank you.
ありがとうございました。こういった観点からのコメントについて。
So from these perspectives, Philippe from EDF, what do you think?
That only just a 2 gigawatt of transmission system that will give the huge impact and the benefit.
Me, it's clear. 2 gigawatt is a good start, and the study we have made shows that the profitability is good even for higher value of interconnection. So it reminds me the first interconnection in Europe by EDF. It was between UK and France. It was 2 gigawatts. So I think 2 gigawatts is a good start.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much. One other perspective. As we discuss this matter, well, Mr. Miwa, you emphasized this point as well, Mr. Miwa. But the political will is a major factor because technically speaking, there is no problem. I think that is very clear, especially in other countries. It's been verified by other countries. But as you talked about, even if it's a small-scale grid, we can expect tremendous benefits, and overall we can have very good positive chemical reaction. But then what about the political will? That is the question. For example, there are issues pertaining to energy security issues pertaining to various countries. But in the case of South Korea, as a country, you have very strong interest in this project as the South Korea. But when it comes to, what about the energy security discussion going on in South Korea? Any views, please?
I think I think many Japanese people can express their concerns about energy security, and Korea as well. And is according to the Asian supergrid concept, is we will import some electric power from China. But we have to think about the advantages of Asian supergrid. For example, it is easy to imagine that is Chinese people or Korean industries or Korean people or Japanese industries or Japanese people make business or make money in Mongolia, and they put the money in the bank, and they will withdraw the money in Japan. It is quite simple. For example, Japanese industries can make renewable energy businesses in China or in Mongolia, and China and Korea will transmit the power you made. Then you withdraw the power you made in other countries. So it's actually your power you have generated. So in this, according to this concept, is energy security can be mitigated, part of it.
Thomas. Thank you. Thomas, any views?
The term energy security is one thing. The term security in a wider sense is a different one. And security in a wider sense is supported by successful cooperation, and cooperation that yields benefits to both parties. And connecting electricity grids reduces costs to both parties. And the cooperation via the electricity market that has been established in Europe has certainly been of benefit to all, and that is very visible. So it shows us that we can all benefit from cooperation rather than trying to solve the electricity supply by ourselves. And by experiencing the benefit of cooperation, you tend to start cooperating in other areas as well, reducing the risks of conflicts. And I think this is certainly an opportunity in this part of the world also, to cooperate for mutual benefit and thereby inspiring further cooperation instead of conflict and hostility.
In an interim report, yes, about international connections, by connecting them for security in the region, for energy security, it would benefit both. I think that's one of the comments, observations we made before. We talked about Mongolia. Mr. Yoon mentioned this. As for the Mongolian government, there was was mentioned. It was a presentation at the outset. When they realized what are the benefits, when it is realized what will be the benefits in Mongolia.
Okay. Of course, there is a lot of environmental benefits. Savings of the carbon and greenhouse gas effect, etc. So in case of the Mongolia, of course, there will be a job creation inside the country of Mongolia. So job creation also it follows the today during the morning shops, Mr. Biem Psahan, Mongolian Business Council also mentioned that there will be some second income resource for the Mongolia from the electricity export. So it's I see that it's not only the profit is not only belongs to the Mongolia. It's the Asian Supergrid initiative is the international initiative. Also, the project will be international project. Ownership also it will be international. So all of the shareholders can be benefited from that project and that initiatives. Of course, there will be some tax, land, water, and land consumption tax within the country. Of course, the government can be benefited from that. But in the reality, in the case of the business, it will be the international business. I see that.
Thank you. Actually, there are many stakeholders who are present, as participants, the Mongolian government, Korea, including these. There are many representatives in Mongolia. The very first commercial wind power generation, Saukit, the power plant, the project manager from Saukit, who is the leader of the business coalition. So as a coordinator from Mongolia, you have engaged in this project as well. So about benefits for Mongolia, what are the economic benefits for Mongolia? What do you think?
Thank you, everyone. Just to add to Mr. Irangultsi's remarks, Mongolia is a landlocked country. So we currently are very much dependent on commodity markets, our economy. And we have 3.3 million people. Our economy is very small, about $13 billion economy. And foreign investment, FDI, is very important for the growth of the economy, and also foreign exchange coming from our exports, right? So what we have seen in the past years is when commodity markets fluctuate, so does our economy, so does our income, and so does the business growth in the country. So we are really in the path of creating long-term kind of benefit for the economy via renewable energy generation and export to these neighboring markets. And so Mongolia is here in the long term. But what we have to do in the short term is to focus on regulatory reforms, which is critical. And I think our presentations here have showed. And then based on that, we will develop our longer term or revise our longer term economic development policy, right? Which will rely not only on mining product exports, but also on clean energy exports to the region. And I think the benefits, as Mr. Irangultsi mentioned, will be there. We'll have job creation, we will have tax revenues, and then of course foreign direct investment coming in, and then there'll be other benefits such as know-how and technology use, right? And we feel that this can impact other players in the region. And the good thing compared, again, to other players is that Mongolian business is ready and is signed up for this effort, and also the government is signed up for this effort. Hence, we are all gathered here for this workshop.
Thank you very much. So from such a viewpoint, SoftBank, of course, is enthusiastically pursuing projects in Mongolia. Miwa-san, centering around natural energy, interconnection project is being pursued by SoftBank. If you could please elaborate on that once again, and about the future potential as well, please. Well, thank you. First of all, Thomas talked about security in a wider sense. I thought that I agreed with him listening to what he had to say. I work for SoftBank, so I'm a business person, but as a human, well, there's this phrase, human security. And that is the starting point of everything, I think. You are a human before being a business person. As a human being, well, I think India is saying this, and apologies to Indian people. You go to New Delhi, and if you go out of the airport, you start to cough, and sputum is generated. That's the reality. So as a human, we have to think about human security, and that concept needs to be respected in the business community as well. So ASG's basic concept is pretty simple. SoftBank is making an investment in 2 gigawatt project in Mongolia, in Gobi Desert, and the fruit of that should be brought back to Japan. And in the process, even if physically there's no interconnection, how shall I put it? We call it push in, push out. Well, Apple, at one point in the past, said that they were turning into a 100% renewable company, and they had this concept. You are purchasing power from the grid, but commensurate to the power they consume, they are making as much investment in generating power through renewables. So that is why Apple can define itself as a 100% renewable company. That was the concept they had. So likewise, SoftBank is going to do a wind power project in Gobi Desert, and by that, I think we can say that we're doing 100% renewables. Of course, push in, push out, as I said, from Mongolia to China. When power exits China, is exactly the same amount of power going to come out of China, not necessarily. And Mongolia has overwhelmingly cheap resources. In the case of Russia as well, it has water resources. And so we have to consider all those resources and their potential. So in the past, pre-FS, that was one of the focal points or themes. So that is what we have in mind. Thank you for sharing that. So in Europe, there are already specific examples, case studies. Here in Asia, people talk about potential. So Dorf-san, given what was discussed in introducing natural energy massively, of course, transmission grids are going to play a major role. By leveraging the role of transmission grids, we are able to expand the use of natural energy or renewables quite broadly. Being in Japan, it's sort of hard to imagine. But what kind of business model are we talking about? What kind of approach should we think about, given your experience in Europe? Well, sorry for bringing this up all of a sudden, but any comments on that, please?
Well, I don't know whether Europe is right now the best example. I mean, as we heard, the process in Europe has taken 50 years to get to where it is today. But there are other examples. There is an interesting case where Singapore is now going to import hydropower from Laos. And so it is a similar discussion in the Southeast Asia region. And to make that project work, you need to have an agreement with Laos, with Thailand, with Malaysia, and then Singapore. And it is, in fact, it's a quite similar situation as you face here. It is a little bit easier because there is a physical connection. It is more a matter of how do you make the legal and side and the contracts work. But maybe a comparison with that case would also be useful. In Central America, there is the CEPAC, which is a 300 megawatt line running down from Mexico to Panama. That is an interesting case because for some time it has not worked as well while there was a physical connection. And also from that case, you can draw interesting lessons on that you need to have a harmonized set of regulations if you really want to have maximum benefit of this type of lines.
First of all, I might have been too optimistic earlier when I said that connecting two countries with a power line will necessarily make the electricity supply system more efficient. And you gave a counterexample from an international relation. We could also see that in Japan you have connected the different monopoly zones and they still don't use the opportunity to exchange cheap electricity. They rather produce at higher cost within their regions. So that might have been too optimistic. But then again, what is most important for reducing cost and environmental effects of electricity generation is to actually make the markets work, to actually use the lowest cost electricity. And when you said that the European development had taken 50 years, I think you are exaggerating, because when we changed the regulation of the markets in Europe in the 1990s, that was a rather quick transition. In the Swedish policy process, where I was on the National Energy Commission that was launching the re-regulation of the market, there was a strong feeling that we could not continue waste resources by utilizing our electricity generation capacity in an inefficient way. We immediately realized that introducing a competitive market was a rather complicated thing, so we must keep it as simple as possible. No exemptions, no special rules, keep it simple was necessary to make it work. And then we also took the decision very early that we can't do this in a process with many steps, because that would encourage suboptimal behavior in the different stages. We must do everything during one night. And we did so. And the result in Northern Europe, I think we can agree, it's one of the more efficient markets working, because it's kept very simple, and we did it in a very swift, fast transition. It was so fast that on New Year's Eve 1995, you were, as a customer, by law forced to buy electricity from the owner of the local grid. And after midnight, you were forbidden to buy electricity from the local owner of the local grid. That was a rather dramatic change, but it still worked.
Thank you very much. Philip, anything? What are your thoughts, Philip, with regard to this example? Going forward, of course, business models will emerge, and I'm sure the market analysis will take place, but what are your thoughts based on these examples so far? What are some of the concrete examples that you can talk about? Thank you.
A concrete example I know the best is Europe. The main asset of Europe is that we have an economic community. Here in Northeast Asia, it's more difficult, but I think you have the political will to do it. And I think it's when, for example, to come back to the example of IFA, the link between France and England. When we decided to do it, it was not so difficult. It was difficult to talk about, to organize a project, but after we commissioned it early 80s, and it's still working. And there was no problem at all between France and UK, and it's profitable immediately. So to organize all the frame for an interconnection, you need a political will. If you have an economic cooperation, it's better, but if you don't have, I think you have to build the first interconnection, and with the feedback you can prove easily that it works and it's beneficial for both parties.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much. Well, we have roughly 30 minutes remaining. We would like to take questions from the floor at this juncture. If we could ask you to raise your hands, and if we could ask you to state your name and affiliation, and if you could be brief in your question. One question per each questioner. So shall we start with you, sir? Shall we start with you? With your hand up toward this side of the room, please. Thank you. Hayashi from Spectrum Power Design. It's not so much a question. If I could share with you my examples, because I believe this can be of reference to you. So let me speak about, if you could be brief, sir, please. My apologies. Well, I'm involved in PPS, securing cheap power for supermarkets. Supermarkets in Japan pay 100 billion. The next largest buyer pays 86 billion yen for power. So, but although they use the same source of power, there's a gap in the tariffs. And let's say that these companies set branch offices outside Japan. They find that the utility cost is 1/3 the utility cost here in Japan. That is the reality. Back in 1996, I was with a large trading house, and I was involved in a feasibility study involving direct current program with Russia. It was in Sakhalin. Well, we will create LNG in Sakhalin and then connect that to Kashiwazaki plant in Japan. I think I can share this. Kashiwazaki, the price at Kashiwazaki was at 5.5 yen. That's the feasibility study. We received funding from the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry from Japan. So the red power represents issues pertaining to security. So politically, this project was shut down. But now, in 2011, there was a connection to Kashiwazaki. That earthquake, remember that earthquake in 2011? If we had power from Russia to Kashiwazaki, 4 million kilowatt. If we had that available at that time, what would have happened? We did not have to have that rolling blackouts in 2011. So the security question is totally reverse. So the government opposition, what they're saying is totally the opposite. Now the supermarkets, they could not operate because they have power shortages. They pay such electricity cost. However, in power shutdowns, they're not guaranteed. So people from SoftBank, you are achieving the plan that we set forth 20 years ago. We know that there's going to be a major earthquake coming in Japan going forward. So connect us with Russia and South Korea. This represents Japanese security for Japan. And also with regard to the grid interconnection, in 2003, TEPCO, Mr. Katsumata of TEPCO, instead of expanding grid connection, he said that a similar effect could be had by having double adjusted lines. The supermarkets have shops throughout Japan, but in the supermarkets in Tohoku and also supermarkets in Tokyo, they're not able to have a supply, equal energy supply, despite the fact that there is such a linkage. So this is simply based on my personal experience. But if you could use this as a point of reference, I would appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So the electricity had colors, communist color. I didn't know that until I heard you. So thank you. Next person, please. And then the person in the back.
Philippe mentioned about the development of
Could I have your name?
Eurasific. I'm involved in the ADB project, and I have a quick question to take the benefit to have many nationalities represented of the NAPSI. Philippe mentioned the setup of authority, a body to coordinate the interconnection, and I would like to have the reaction of the different nationalities representing regarding this setup. How you view the setup of a body to coordinate the interconnection between the different countries?
Thank you. Well, each speaker may have different opinions. Yoon-san talked about intergovernmental cooperation, that the intergovernmental cooperation is necessary. I think we can look at the EU for some references. Yoon-san, at the government level, is that coming from the governmental level cooperation? Would you like to elaborate on that, please?
It is said that infrastructure business is typical top-down business. So especially in 3 countries, China and Korea and Japan, is definitely government drives the energy policy, including electric power. So that's why we paid a lot of attention, and also we shared a lot of information and made some efforts together with Korean government, and especially MOTIE, is Ministry of Trade and Industry and Energy, which is in charge of electric power business in Korea.
I first like to thank the first gentleman who illustrated so clearly the cost of not having a transparent national electricity market, and then the importance for supply security of actually having international connections. Regarding how to achieve the interconnectors and efficient utilization of the interconnectors, I'm not sure that the best way is to have some sort of special institution to look after the interconnector. The ideal and the most efficient way of using a connector is to actually have transparent spot markets on each side, so that you always get the cheapest electricity within reach and use the transmission capacity for that purpose. And the examples we just heard and many other examples from Japan shows that this achieving a competitive market to bring down the cost of electricity is an extremely urgent task in Japan, because we cannot afford to see a situation where electricity prices will be unnecessarily high in Japan in this competitive world, and not utilizing the new technological opportunities in renewable energy because of the established power companies having such a strong control of how the electricity system works. But we may need coordination in establishing such competitive markets on the different sides of a transmission line. And we see today there is a Japanese power exchange, there is a Korean power exchange, but the rules, how they work, are slightly different today. So they would need to be a bit more coordinated and transparent in order for them to be able to decide how a transmission line is to be utilized.
ありがとうございました。
Thank you very much. Let us move on to the next question. I see a hand in the very back, and then I see another hand toward my right. So in that order. My name is Shimizu from International Energy Journal. I would like a comment from the panelists. I say so because ASG initiative. What is the basic significance of having this project, ASG initiative? In Mongolia, we're talking about generating 50 or 100 gigawatt renewable power generation, and through China and Korea, sending power to Japan using grids. Well, in the past, a nuclear power plant shall have 1 million kilowatt, or a coal-fired power plants 1 million kilowatt power. So I think we heard a similar concept with other types of power plants. Renewables, natural energy, shall serve a role also in the local community, creating jobs in the local community. And I thought that that would be part of the benefit of harnessing natural energy or renewables. But in ASG, sending power to Japan, no problem there. What about the benefit to the local community and so forth? Well, thank you very much for the question. We heard about European cases in the earlier presentations. Dorf and Thomas, any comments? Philippe as well, if those of you who made presentations can respond, please. So distributed natural energy, that's what you do in your respective countries. So
the driver in Europe is also that there is yearly a fossil fuel import bill of 500 billion euro. And that bill is rising. And the production, let's say the indigenous production of renewable electricity is seen as a way to reduce that import bill. And I think in the case of Japan, it would be the same. So,
and the competition between local development of renewable energies and the international trade may be there, but again, a 2 gigawatt transmission line will not solve Japan's supply problems, but it may open up the market to become more transparent, giving local initiatives the opportunity to access the market without unjustified rules of batteries or whatever, but may give the opportunity for people to invest in wind power and solar power locally. And for Japan, that would open up a desirable opportunity for rural Japan to earn more money from developing wind power and solar. It would reduce the supply cost. So the way that international connectors would open up the markets is one important thing. The other is that, as I mentioned this morning, that the wind does not always blow, the sun does not always shine. You can solve it with, at the moment, relatively expensive batteries and local storage, but it's also a very attractive, economically attractive way to ensure that you can always get paid for your electricity, that you're able to transmit it to other parts of the region where the wind is not blowing at the moment when you have excess, and at the same time you can buy back wind power from areas where the wind is blowing when it's not blowing at your place. So transmission capacity is not blocking local solution, it's helping it, and especially it will be helped if the international connectors could help opening up the markets to a more transparent way of utilizing generating capacity.
Yes, I agree. First of all, the interconnections are profitable. So if you build in the country, you have also the opportunity to have a profitable infrastructure, and you have the choice. Second, the interconnection gives you additional flexibility, and this additional flexibility will be good news for the renewable energy development inside the country. Because I'm convinced that the interconnection are coherent with the development of renewable energy. And you see, for example, in Europe, that I know the best, we have massive flows of renewable energy, and we use the interconnection for sending the renewable energy in other countries. So the interconnection, when you have enough interconnection coherent with the level of renewable energy in your country, reduces the risk of curtailment.
What about KEPCO as an operator? What are your thoughts? From KEPCO, please.
Okay, definitely I agree with Thomas and also Philip. So as I I partially understand that concern is what is the benefit for local people, and so we can think about existing power plants in Japan or in Korea. Is sometimes it is too old or it shall be rehabilitated, but you don't have enough reserve to shut down the aged power plants or coal-fired or LNG-fired. And this power grid interconnection can be a reserve power for this situation. So you can reduce the you can reduce aged power plants or unnecessary reserve power plants, and this power grid interconnection help this situation as well. Thank you.
ありがとうございます。Thank you very much. As far as we're concerned, as the Renewable Energy Institute, naturally we are promoting renewable energy, but at the same time, we believe that we understand the notion of producing locally and consuming locally. However, if you have the grid connection, we'll be able to have greater flexibility for the system as a whole. That benefit is going to be quite significant. That is our thought. Now, in Europe, of course, we tend to focus on EU as a whole, but depending on regions, you have more than 100%. For example, in places like Denmark, in one single nation, they have the ability to provide 100% wind power in certain occasions. But then they're making use of that power through various interconnection of grid. So in countries such as Denmark, very inexpensive power can be accessed from Denmark. But when you look at the scale of Denmark, it's only 1/10 or 1/20 the size of Japan. So it's like we could have several European countries inside Japan. That's one way of looking at it. So why not connect that and give greater flexibility and expand renewable energy? I think that is quite important. So at all levels, we really need to pursue this initiative. So at the local level, and also at nationwide as well, we need to ensure flexibility at the nationwide level, and also greater flexibility by connecting with other countries through international grid connection. In Kyushu, for example, at peak times, 70% of the peak load is not covered by solar power. So if Kyushu could be connected to the main island here in Japan or with South Korea, even greater flexibility can be gained, and we can make greater usage of the available renewable energy. I believe that in Japan, one day 100% renewable energy usage can be achieved in Japan someday down the road. We hope that we'll be able to connect with other countries and gain greater flexibility at that juncture. That is very important. But we talk about this issue. We talked about exports and imports. Many people tend to be preoccupied with the issue of import and export. But in order to expand the usage of renewable energy in the local community, you need grid interconnection.
Yes. Over there, please. From Kyushu. I'm from Kyushu. 23 years ago, one by one, we gathered panel. We tried to generate our own electricity, having engaged in these activities. Now, FIT, when you made investment in facilities, commensurate the investment, then you receive the compensation. In a way, the society is made richer, and the values that are created are fed back into the society. So it's a valuable process. But unfortunately, if you look at Kyushu, more than 70% of that renewable energy is available for the peak. Yes, values have been created, but facilities investment have been done by people outside of the local community. So when the values are created, that values actually go away from that community. Now, interconnections, what kind of roles can they play? In terms of traffic, it's about with the good logistics completed, the resources available in the community, they would be revealed as valuable things and with that, the society can be made richer, and that has happened in the physical world. So energy that supports that fundamentally. Renewable energy in the place where the wind is available, where the sun is shining, where the water flows. That's the source of values, given that when the facilities, CAPEX is made and the investment is made, and then the fruits are enjoyed by the people who made investment outside of the community, that might be a bit of a problem. If you think that, oh, this is freely available, these are natural resources, it should be free. And then if you look at the so far, the CO2 was emitted and that was not paid for, making this system available for community so that the people in the community can reap the benefits of the values created by the local resources. That's what I think. How do you think? So about the FIT, could we address that as a FIT issue? Even without FIT, I understand that what you have said is true. The renewable energy, when there are the places that are richly endowed with natural energies, then that would attract a lot of investment from outside of the community. But with this new renewable energy power generation, Japan as a whole, fossil fuel, the investment can be eliminated, for instance, and also the dependency on nuclear power generation can be reduced. So there are other benefits. Any observations? Any comments? For instance, pay special attention to that community that is endowed with natural resources. Any initiatives or any cases, particularly in Germany, I think you have some examples, and I think also Denmark had some examples too.
I mean, looking in Europe at countries that have successfully developed renewables, so Germany has been doing well, Denmark has been doing well, for example, also parts of Belgium have been doing well. And these are places where there is a lot of this community type projects. And especially for wind, it has been very important because where outsiders come and develop projects, then they look at wind turbines as a problem. It causes movements, it causes noise, etc. Where the local community develops the wind project, then the wind turbine generates revenues for the community, and then it's seen as a valuable project. So for wind, it has really helped. For solar, I would say, first of all, solar is a little bit different because a lot of solar is, of course, rooftop solar, and that is automatically there is an ownership relation. And but I hear less of that on solar.
I agree with what Dolph has said. I could just add that also in Denmark, Sweden, Germany, Finland, for example, a significant contribution to the renewable energy generation is cogeneration plants using local biomass and waste that is burnt and produces electricity, and the cooling water is used to heat buildings. So when it comes to waste incineration, you're paid to receive the waste, you burn it and you produce electricity that you're paid for, and the cooling water is used to heat houses, which are also paid for. I believe that in Japan there are still examples where you burn waste and just heat the air, which for a Swede seems to be not really a smart way of using that resource. So this is done by municipalities because they can easily deal with the local planning to establish the grid of heat pipes that you need to distribute the heat to heat buildings, and it's owned by the local municipality that usually collects the waste and residues and manage this system, and all the inhabitants know that they should sort their waste properly because that will contribute to their houses being heated in an efficient way and the local electricity being produced. So in addition to the wind, I think this opportunity of cogeneration using household waste or biomass from industries and so on is an opportunity that should not be neglected.
先ほどご質問いただいた
So the earlier questioner, why are we trying to develop a massive wind farm in Mongolia, trying to transmit over such a long distance? Well, let me just share with you our thinking. Renewables, are they local? Are they locally produced, locally consumed? Perhaps so. But in the world, which countries have the best solar resources? Look at the world map. Where there are red spots, there are a lot of solar resources. If it's blue, not much. And wind resources as well. There's a wind map worldwide. And so you are able to observe that looking at the world map. So there are countries blessed with abundant natural resources and electricity demand. They do not necessarily match. Countries with greatest electricity demand, there's a mismatch. But then there's so much wind blowing in Gobi Desert. In India, there's idle land. In Saudi Arabia, there's idle land where there is abundance of solar resources. Why not develop them? But what is developed, the fruit, should be brought to where the demand is through transmission lines. So that is the order of things. So right resources in the right place. Well, that was the thinking. And HVDC, well, that technology had to be developed technologically in a stable manner. In a cost-efficient way, you are able to send power over a distance of 2,000 kilometers, and yet electricity loss can be kept within 5%. Such technology has become available. So natural resources no longer have to be locally produced, locally consumed. And so if you develop it in the right way, you are able to solve the demand issue, climate change, environmental issues, and economically as well. If we look at the economics, renewables cost has come down substantially. So these were the drivers, if you will. I don't think I answered every question, but that was the thinking that went behind this. So look at renewables from that perspective. And that is exactly the kind of perspective that we see our project in Mongolia. Now, capacity ratio, is that the right phrase? I'm not sure. 8,760 hours. Of that, how much solar can we get? You can count that. Here in Japan, if we do a wind farm, it's operational only 10+%. In the case of Mongolia, the rate is 45%. So wind is blowing 45% of the time instead of 10+ in Japan. So wind can be harnessed in Mongolia. In terms of solar energy, in India, you get 3 times more solar energy out of a project in India as compared to Japan. So you should develop where there are resources, but there's not all that much demand in that area. And that is why we're trying to connect where the supply and the demands are. Thank you.
As we are running out of time from this point onwards, from myself and down to Mr. Oi, as was the case with the previous session, I would like to ask your views about what you would like to do in order to achieve this international grid interconnection here in Asia. So last round of comments, 30 seconds each. What you would like to do in order to realize the grid connection here in Asia? What would I want to do? At Renewable Energy Institute, we have carried out various research activities, and we have connected various stakeholders. We have held workshops outside Japan. We have done that. We have done that with ADB as well. So against the backdrop this year, with regard to Japanese stakeholders, we want to communicate about the importance of the grid interconnection. And for that purpose, we want to expand the network. That's what I would like to do. In particular, so for the policymakers, I want to extend the network. Next, please. Thank you very much. Well, in international financial institutions, among the international financial institutions, I think we are the one that really focuses on regional interconnection. and regional coordination. And from that perspective, we wanted to carry out this study, or we launched this study about this grid interconnection. So what's bad about interconnection? So we want to do as much as possible to pursue this interconnection going forward. That's what I would like to do in this against this backdrop. And also, furthermore, I'm a Japanese, but what is the incentive in Japan to pursue this grid interconnection? I hope that I'll be able to identify the incentives to pursue this interconnection here in Japan, because in the case of Mongolia, there are clear incentives, especially for their economic policy. And for South Korea, industrial promotion, I think that was another very major incentive. In the case of China, naturally, investment outside their own country, they have a very clear-cut, straightforward policy. So they want to increase overseas investment, and they want to increase FDI rather. And so pursuing interconnection is very consistent with their policy. We need to do the same for Japan. Thank you.
For me, as you have seen in my presentation, I think that the Asian supergrid or the Northeast Asia interconnection is a good idea. It's a good idea for all the countries involved, and it's a good idea for Mongolia, of course, because we have confirmed the high potential of renewable energy and the competitivity of renewable energy produced in Mongolia.
KEPCO also get many questions. What is the benefit for Korean people and Korea through the power grid interconnection project? So at that time I explain first the vision of the supergrid. So 5 countries or 6 countries in Northeast Asia is do the core development of renewable energy sources and jointly utilize that through the Asian supergrid. So it can be the renewable resources by solar and wind in Japan, and also it can be in China or in Mongolia. Anyhow, it is a bit difficult to predict the output of solar and wind power, and it is not controllable. So we can develop the renewable energy sources, and we can share, and also we can jointly utilize renewable energy sources through the power grid interconnection. Okay, thank you.
And then what will you do?
So definitely we will do our best, and especially with Japanese government and Japanese partners and Chinese partners and Chinese government as well. So we can make win-win strategy and positive sum game.
So on behalf of SoftBank, globally developing renewables, that is something that we would like to continue to work on very hard. That's our intention. And as I said earlier, renewables or natural energy is having an impact in terms of redefining all the industries and sectors. So from that viewpoint, Japan shall not fall behind the other countries in the region. We would like to continue to provide relevant information, and we would like to be a pioneer in these projects. And for that, we shall continue to work hard. Thank you.
The table is the best experience from other similar multinational projects, and for this concrete case, what seems a very important step is this interconnector between Japan and Korea as a start.
As I've been saying since I started working for this institute soon 7 years ago, it is not a matter of opening transmission cables just to import electricity to Japan. The most important reform is to open up the market so that Japan can benefit from the dramatic cost decrease of solar and wind energy technologies globally. Miwa-san was talking about cheap electricity from Mongolia. Wind power can be produced at the same low cost in Hokkaido. Japan has significant energy resources, and opening up for cooperation and exchange of electricity with neighbors will help opening up the electricity market within Japan. And together with the international technological industrial development in renewable energy, this will make Japan an energy resource-rich country, which is a much more enjoyable situation than Japan had in the 20th century, depending on fossil fuels and uranium imported from other countries.
ありがとうございます。それでは最後にクロージング。
Thank you very much. We'd like to invite closing remarks from Mr. Ono, please. Mr. Ono, he has some closing remarks to all of you.
をもらいたいと思います。小野さん。
Mr. Ono, please, the floor is yours, sir. As was introduced, my name is Ono. I'm Executive Director of this institute. I would like to thank you for such a large turnout, and also I also would like to thank all the overseas speakers. On substance, so much has been said. I have really nothing to add. But in the beginning of the second session, as our director Ohbayashi said, we have this study group, and Professor Oyama serves as the chairman. I looked at this, but in May 2017 fiscal year report is about to be published. In the last year's midterm report, was the study of the European cases. It was more or less rudimentary, but this time Korea, Russia, specific routes, the plan, cost, benefit, they really show you some specific matters, issues. So this report, I think, will help escalate the interconnection discussions to the next phase. In the May or June, the FY 2017 report is likely to be published, and we are planning to have another meeting. We would like you to participate so that we can make the progress on the discussion of the international connections in Asia. I hope that you will keep paying attention to what we do. With this request, I would like to conclude today's meeting. Thank you so much for your kind participation. Thank you. There is going to be reception. If you just go out of the hall, it's a foyer. I'm pretty sure you want to have more discussion. Some of the speakers will be available for you just to grab them and then enjoy conversation in the foyer. Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking the members of the panel and the interpreters as well.